And good evening, everyone. It is X Squared Radio. This is the 2-minute warning. We'll start the stream in 2 minutes. So this gives you a chance to join the chat room. And good evening, everyone. Radio. Take care of that. Nice to have all the technical difficulties out of the way before we begin the broadcast. Hope everyone's okay. Happy Valentine's Day in the immortal words of Al Capone. All good. All. Got about 45 seconds and we will start this stream. So, good chance to get in the chat room. Everything should be flowing okay. Checking the dashboard. Everything is green. Except for Facebook. Facebook doesn't seem to sending data, but it's not arriving. So Facebook may come online. We'll see what happens. Let's go ahead and bring the studio on, and we will get this party started.
Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz. America is listening to Fox News.
If you're a business owner, you don't need us to tell you that running a business
wherever you are. Frequency Radio.
First hour, here we go. All right. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live. The America Free Radio Studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains. Streaming to you through the Truth Frequency Radio Network at tfrlive.com. We do have a live call-in board, and the phone number is posted right there on video. But for those of you listening on audio, it's 213-233-3998, anywhere on Earth. We're also streaming to you live by YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, DLive, and ta-da, we have been reinstated to Twitter. So we are streaming live on Periscope to Twitter tonight. And sorry about the notifications not going on YouTube. Don't know what's going on there, but occasionally they just 11,000 subscribers. They say, "Oh well, we'll make them opt in again." So make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure to turn your notification bell on, and don't forget to hit the like button on your way in. And many people listening also on DLive, and we're waiting for the Twitch listeners to come in. I really like Twitch. I like the format. It's just a good, clean format. They're very pleasant folks down there at Twitch. Brian, good to see you. Mark, Blue Otter, time listener, no notifications. Sorry about that. I have no control over that. Eric, good to see you. Big D 1955 on DLive, and Jameson Walker. Wow, now there's a Scotch name. Got the wife in the kitchen where she belongs, and got Brooks on where he belongs. Happy Valentine's, y'all. Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's the NASA hat tonight. It was just the top of the pile. I kind of rotate them around, Don't want them to get worn out. The head goes on and on, but the hats wear out. All right, very good. Let's get started because we have a ton of stuff to go over tonight. And some of it is new to you. I think you maybe haven't heard it yet. We've been searching for this information, and finally it was revealed, and I'm willing to share it. I'm going to share it on screen so you can see it tonight. It is not what we expected to see by any means, but it is heartbreaking, heartrending to tell this story, but we're going to tell it. So let's begin on a high note tonight. Good evening, Mike. Good to see you out there. Raspberry, good to see you there as well. Why is my awareness here and your awareness over there? Why is the universe split in two for each of us? There's the inside our space and the outside of our space. Outside of our space is what we call the average reality. It is the sum, the sum of all the sentient beings in the universe and their observation. Outside of your space is grass. Mine, grass. Our neighbor's grass. But inside, we each have a different actual view of that grass. Our awareness is slightly different. Now, how is each of us, our own center of experience? Why isn't there like a central cable experience that goes to everybody? We have our own individual soul address and our own individual biological transducer through which we interpret the universe. Everything we see, hear, taste, smell, feel is through this biological transducer and whatever interpretations we can make of those signals. Why are some things conscious and other things apparently not? I mean, ask yourself, is a rat conscious? A fish? A gnat? A rock? The answer is yes, they are. But humans are the only ones that have these two perspectives, that have one on the inside and one on the outside. And these questions are all aspects of this ancient mind-body problem. It's a little bit like particle-wave duality. What is the relationship between mind and matter? What if I were to tell you that matter would not exist without mind? Or to put it another way, matter would not exist without consciousness. It's not that hard of a concept. David Chalmers coined this term in a now classic paper and further explored in his 1996 book, The Conscious Mind in Search of a Fundamental Theory. Of course, you could read the 2007 book, Remembering the Future, The Physics of the Soul and Time Travel, and you could pick up another aspect of it. Because your mind not only has awareness in this now, but other nows, other pasts, in which you may or may not even have been in human form. Nevertheless, sentient. I'm writing the 12th book. I'm writing the series, the sequel, to Charm a Favor. I'm not going to tell you the title yet. It's unimportant. But there's a concept that has to come to me, or I have to resolve it before I begin a new book. And then I begin my outline. And the outline isn't like, 1 ABCD, 2 ABCD. My outlines don't work like that. They're not linear. They're more like a juxtaposition. Your awareness is in the middle of the page. And then as what a Gantt chart is, what happens is bubbles of reality exist around that. Here's this group over here, and this group over here, and this terrorist over here, and this antagonist over here, and this comic relief over here. And this is how they connect together. And here's the interconnections. It turns out sort of like a 3D image that I do on paper. And when I'm writing, I go from chapter to chapter. I look at that diagram because I can see where the groups are in time. Now, when you read the book, you're reading from page 1 to 400 and whatever. And so for you, it's a linear experience. But for me, writing it and putting it together, it is a fifth dimensional experience. So as a writer, I have to take this fifth dimensional experience and turn it into a linear experience so that you can take this journey and you can receive this multi-dimensional experience. And if you've read any of my books, especially in the Birth trilogy or Charm of Favor, you get that. Karen says, loved Charm of Favor, can't wait for the sequel, was hoping you would write one. Yes, some people wanted me to write a sequel to Birth, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because if you've read the third volume of Birth, the ending is the beginning. It is unbelievable, but it is not like you want to write another season, because a lot of series do that. They get to the best part. Everybody is, having the Last Supper or whatever, as it were. And then the next season comes out and they push it and they push it and they push it. And then it becomes not entertaining. It becomes mundane. It changes where you are. Case in point, Star Wars. You remember Star Wars, right? 4, 5, and 6, A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, right? You thought, well, that's great. I mean, the Death Star's exploded, the Emperor's dead, blah, blah. So what do? They go back and write a prequel. So they start with episode 1. And in episode 1, Qui-Gon tests little Anakin Skywalker's blood and comes up with this thing called midichlorians. You remember that? Midichlorians? Well, when you first learn about the Force, it's Obi-Wan Kenobi that tells you about the Force. This force that binds everything. It flows through everything in the universe. And there's a light side and a dark side. And even Yoda tells you, fear leads to the dark side. So you realize it is this conscious energy. And the two forces in the universe that are for good or for evil, you have the Rebel Alliance for good, and you have the Empire for bad, right? Those are the two forces. But when Lucas goes back to the prequel, which is for us the sequel, because we think in linear fashion, now the Force has changed. Now the Force is some symbiotic relationship with some nano bug that can exist in high concentrations in some people and not in others, and that's what gives us this ability to precog the universe. Ridiculous. I lost faith. I almost gave up on Star Wars right then. I didn't want to see episode 2. That's what I'm talking about. That's what would have happened if I would have written a sequel to Birth Volume 3, which is subtitled The Gathering, Leolam. Leolam in Hebrew means for worlds. Gathering for worlds. Now, I could go do, a Stargate SG-1 series, and we can go into all the worlds, and who knows where that would go. I mean, really, who knows? So I wrote a prequel, sort of, to it, which was Charm of Favor. How did we get there? What happened to get the universe to that point? Or get the United States to that point? And I made it real. I put Trump in there. I put Mattis in there, which I got wrong, by the way. Sorry about that. But, all those pieces were put together, and it's a big screen movie. But Charm of Favor does lend itself to a sequel. So, as, Birth is the stem, Charm of Favor is the root, and so I can go off with another branch from Charm of Favor. So that's what I'm doing. I'm writing a sequel to it. Jack Rousseau and the Rousseau family and all that are in it. Those characters that you fell in love with that went through that multidimensional struggle trying to save America from the Global Syndicate, they're all in there. But I needed a theme. I needed something that would bind it together. What is the thing that like Joe Biden would say, to pull it all together? And this was it. This was it. The question most people ask about the dark side, about the evil, about the Global Syndicate, about the cabal, if you want to call it that. Why is it that they announce to us what they're going to do before they do it? Why do they tell us about the plot? Why do they tell us about, wanting to reduce the population of Earth to 500 million? Why do they tell us about assassinations? Why do they tell us about bombs and invasions and all this espionage and stuff? Why do they have to do that before it actually happens? I mean, it's like, okay, well, you kind of gave us a hint. Now we're going to stop you. But that is not how resonation works. That's not how vibration works. all things in the universe are constantly in motion. They're vibrating. And the frequency changes, especially if it has free will. It changes at will. Even objects that appear to be stationary are in fact vibrating. That's why when you walk into a crystal shop or a rock shop or a head shop, you are walking by rows of sections of jasper and tourmaline and rose quartz, and you're blind. You're like, I don't even know what to pick. But what happens? You know what happens, right? Especially you crystal crunchers, you know what happens. A rock speaks to you. Oh, I really like this one. And so you pick it up and you hold it. Yeah, I'm buying this one right here. 2 for $1? No problem. I'll get 2 of them. That's the vibration of just a stupid polished rock. Resonance is a type of motion, okay? It's characterized by oscillation between 2 states. And ultimately, all matter is just vibrations of various underlying fields, such as, every scale of nature vibrates, plants and animals and water and air even. Something interesting happens when different vibrating things come together. They either destructively interfere and thus destroy each other or shatter or come apart or crack or become unincorporated, or they resonate with each other. They create harmony. There are harmonics. There's something that builds, and so the 2 parts, when they're put together, are greater than the sum. It is sort of like a symphony. When it comes together and plays, you hear the oboe, you hear the violin, you hear the piano, you hear maybe the French horn. But when they all come together, it makes a feeling. It's not even a sound anymore. It's not even one you can hum or a group of people can hum. It's a feeling that comes together because of this very carefully designed resonation between those different strings, reeds, and mouthpieces, right? It is. So just checking. Yes, wars and rumors of wars, Jameson Walker. Exactly, wars and rumors of wars. And sometimes we read in the Bible, oh, these are prophecies. They have to come true. Here's why. When fireflies of certain species come together in large gatherings, they start flashing in sync. Okay? The moon's rotation around the Earth is exactly synced with its orbit around the Earth, such that we always see the same side. So it rotates at 28 revolutions. It rotates once every 24 hours. So as the Earth turns, so does the moon, and the same side faces us all the time. It takes 28 days to go around our planet, but each of those 28 days, we're looking at the same side all the time. And we never see the far side of the moon. There's no dark side of the moon. There's a far side of the moon. So the point that I'm trying to make is the reason that the dark side tells us what they're going to do before they do it is because the dark side doesn't belong in this dimension. They don't. You remember, they didn't earn the right to be here. They are blocked from coming here. There's enmity between Lucifer and the seed of the woman. They can't just possess the bodies that are created by Adam and Eve. And that's true. That's true to this day. Unless, of course, the body of Adam and Eve chooses to let the demon dwell within. And that's not all the story. That is described in Genesis as the seed of Adam and Eve. But what about the seed of Lucifer and Eve? What about Cain? What about his progenitors? Okay? What about his descendants. Now we're talking about a DNA that is compatible with a soul, a spirit that has gone around the well of souls and come into this third dimension anyway. It doesn't belong here. It doesn't have a right to be here, and it can't resonate in this reality. Nothing it does, nothing a demon says can be real. It can be ethereal, it can be a feeling, but it can't manifest in this dimension. And yet, it does. It does. How? Because of you. It's because of you and me. What they do is they put their idea into our dimension. They do it on TV and radio and print and songs and movies and in our schools, and they train us. And what happens is we carry their ideas into the third dimension, and we're the ones that make it resonate in this dimension and thus create the reality for them. They're parasites. They use our third dimensional right to exist in this dimension to create their reality. And unfortunately for us, it affects the average reality. Now, of course, in the beginning, there was just Cain, and, he went to the land of Nod, and there were already a lot of humans on the earth, but it did not take long to get everything screwed up. It was so bad that God had to clean the earth, right? He had to clean the earth with water. But did he get rid of all the genetics? No. Some survived. Some survived, and they came back. And we went to war with them over and over and over. And every time we beat them down, they slowly worked their way back up. And now we haven't had a war like that in a long time, millennia, multiple millennia. And so they have grown, and they have metastasized, and they have seeped and soaked into every aspect of our society, all over the world. Still, they had to pick their leaders. They had to pick their champions to take their ideas forward. And there aren't many. There aren't hundreds of these that do this. There are only 6 on the whole earth. There are only 6 media moguls. That's it. And 4 tech giants. 10 white men. 10 white men that flood the earth with this illegitimate reality. And we are the ones that bring it into this dimension for them. Some of us do it willingly, and some of us do it out of fear or habit, or just because it's something to talk about all the time. Every time we talk about it, every time we mention it, every time we think of it, not so much think about it, but eventually if you dwell on something long enough, you're going to act on it, and that's what people do. They dwell on something, and eventually they act on it. When they do, it's in this dimension. And so all that stuff, all that pedophilia, all that murder, all that rape, all that slavery, all that racism, everything, we are creating for them. We didn't originate it. We didn't think of it. They did. They put it out there, and we're the ones that made it real. That's the core of the book. And what we all want to know tonight, in the next 4 minutes of this segment, and then I'm going to change subjects, is how do we stop the resonation? How do we break the cycle so that demons cannot thrive in this dimension? Our resonance builds this for them, and then they can stand upon it. We're the ones that are creating it. The panpsychist argues that consciousness did not emerge at some point during evolution. It was causative. It's always associated with matter and vice versa. And there are 2 sides to the same coin. This destructive and constructive interference, chaos, as it were, or creation. An electron, atom, planets, it either exists or doesn't exist, and if it exists, it has to be self-perpetuating. You can't just go out and pump up all the protons in the universe and keep them energized. They got to be energized in and of themselves and indestructible, and they are. And biological organisms can quickly exchange information through various biophysical pathways, both electrical and electrochemical. Pheromones, energy fields touching one another. Have you felt the feeling, right, when she smiles at you or when he smiles at you? That, you know what I'm talking about? It's Valentine's Day. Don't tell me you don't know what I'm talking about. That is a energetic exchange. Non-biological structures can only exchange information internally using basic frequencies like heat or light. We are much more multi-capable. Living things leverage their subconscious, their speedier information processing into larger scale consciousnesses than which would occur in similar sized things like, say, a boulder or an ocean. There's much greater internal connection and thus far more going on in biological structures like human beings than in a boulder or, say, a chunk of iron. So the central thesis is that if we aren't angels, at least we are co-creators. We are part of the causative consciousness that makes up planet Earth and thus makes up the universe. That's what this book is about. And yeah, it has these deeper spiritual principles in it, but there's also going to be the high espionage. There's going to be the spying and the assassinations and the cheating and the lying. You're going to see all of it in this book. I'm not sure it's the end of the series, but it is going to change everything. Nobody's ever going to think about this subject the same ever again. And I'll have it ready by Christmas. I promise you, I'll have it. It's going to be 500 pages, but I'll have it ready by Christmas. I just needed that core theme, and it was an epiphany. It is not being forced upon us by Lucifer. We are creating it by suggestion, yes, but we are creating it for him. So we'll send TFR on a break here in a second. We'll hear the music in a second, then we'll send TFR on their break. And then when you guys come back, we will resume with the next subject. In the meantime, people in the chat room and I will communicate. All right, let's go to we got in here. Wow. Okay. Well, we got about 100 people scattered around. Let's see if we can. Yes, God works with free will. Satan doesn't. Actually, yes and no. Remember, if angels express their free will, angels fall. So in that sense, free will is not a good thing. Lucifer works with free will in the sense that he knows what tempts us, okay? And most of us can resist anything except temptation. So when those temptations are put before us, since he's known us for so long, he pretty much knows what choice we're going to make. It's our free will that works against him. When we say, no, I know what chocolate cake does to me, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake. I'm using that figuratively. I'm using it figuratively. But I'm just saying that free will works both ways. But the idea behind most of the holy writings is that we relinquish our free will to God's will, right? I don't really much care for that language. I don't think you do either. And I don't think even God wants you to turn over your life to him. He doesn't. Because then it's like, oh gosh, I have to live this person's life for them. No. You live your own life. You make your own mistakes, feel your own pain, gain your own successes, suffer your own failures. That's what life is. God is there to scrape you up off the bottom if you want to be scraped up and start over again. And don't worry, there's a bottom below that one. JCLP 81, you're very close, pact with God and Satan. And there are two ways of doing this. When you make a commitment to God, you are basically, you have a mighty change of heart. You are leaning toward long-suffering and charity and patience and love, and you're a cheek-turning person. Someone slaps you in the face, it doesn't make you angry enough to kill them. You don't enjoy seeing people in pain. It hurts you to see people in pain. That's making a pact with God. The pact with Satan involves something completely different. I don't even want to talk about it because it's so dark, but it usually involves the willful suffering of a child. And if you ever read the book or the story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin, you should read the story. I have recited it to you before on this program. It's rather lengthy, but it usually involves the suffering of a child in order to give the gift of the blessing. So when you see people that are immensely rich and beautiful and young and successful and everything they touch turns to gold, even if they're evil, it's usually a result of this pact with Satan, because life is not that way. No. Life is random. Life is in motion. Life is a future that is undeterminable, but it is manipulatable by your will, by your love, by your intention. You can manipulate the future. All right, we're going to bring TFR back in. Just a little bit of music.
We are TFR Frequency Radio.
I mentioned chocolate cake in the last segment just as an example. And James Bright says, eating cake now, really strawberry whipped. I just got cake shamed. If that can be done on the radio, I got cake shamed. I'm okay. And Cherokee Drifter, I get the point where we may talk a little bit about this. He says, Biden is ready for our guns, ? That's going to be a little bit of a fight because the Constitution is on our side. And Brian, good point. He said, make a strong vessel, bright white Christ light in your meditation, impenetrable for at least a while. By ourselves, we are very powerful. Pairs, we are invincible. There are carriers and I was going to say wielders, white light wielders here on this planet right now. They didn't have to come here. Could have not come back for another mortal life. They'd already overcome everything. You know why they came back? They came back for you. They came back for you. And there aren't many of them here. And they're scattered around the world. Very, very rarely do they gather together in any kind of number in one place. In fact, we've not been allowed to gather in one place for the last year. I don't know if this is I'm sure this is designed by the dark side, by the Global Syndicate, to keep us from coming together, what we call light workers. It's more than that. There are light workers, yes, but these are light champions. These are people who are beings of light, who are here in the flesh. And do you think they're comfortable? No, they are not comfortable. Some of them, they know they don't belong here and they want to leave. But they also feel the weight of responsibility on their voices, on their heart, on their hands, on their love for you. And that's why they are here. All right, let me continue to the next subject because we have a ton of stuff to go over. Finally, the U.S. government admits it has UFO debris. A stunning admission by the U.S. government that it possesses UFO debris was recently made in response to a Freedom of Information Act request filed over 3 years ago. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, that's the DIA, it's one of those intelligence agencies, has ended decades of speculation by verifying that UFO material has indeed been recovered by the government. It is being sequestered and held by the government. And now it's officially referred to as UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, rather than UFOs. Some of this material was placed with a defense contractor for an analysis and storage in what they call specialized facilities. Not my shop. Because if it was in my shop, I would tell you what it is and hold a picture of it for you. Incredibly, part of the information released discusses material with shape recovery properties. This stuff goes all the way back to 1947. You've heard it before. We've had the author of Roswell on this program a few times. And based on the documentation received, it appears that the retrieved debris exhibits other extraordinary capabilities. In addition to remembering their original form when bent or crushed, some of these futuristic materials have the potential to make things invisible, to compress electromagnetic energy, and even slow down the speed of light so that the ship can actually travel faster than the speed of light. Although much of the reports detailed are redacted, what can be gleaned is that these technologies represent a literal quantum leap beyond the properties of all existing material known to man. Now, the original 2017 FOIA request, let's see here, was about material held by the government and its contractor. The request is unambiguous in its meaning. It refers to UFO, UAP material, and physical debris recovered by personnel of the Department of Defense. And I have to keep in mind here that, and I'm going to go ahead and leave this link in my notes, which you can access after the program. I upload them to my server. All you have to do is go to americafreeradio.com and click on the link. Go to the particular year, which happens to be 2021 right now, and you can click on the month, which happens to be February, and you can click on this date, which happens to be Valentine's Day, the 14th, and boom, these notes will be yours. You can download them. You can search all the links if you want to. And I don't know if I'll send this story out in the newsletter tonight. The newsletters have to be kind of small, otherwise they get kind of spammy, send them out to 4,000 email subscribers. We want to keep it short and to the point and mostly put the link to the program in because we don't get 4,000 viewers. Sorry, we only get about 1,200. And I would love to have all my email subscribers actually watch this program, but they don't. In their reply, the agency amazingly agrees that it has documents responsive to the request. They also provide some reports related to the possible applications of the studied material. And I have to say that I only have information in this story relative to the U.S. We don't know what the UK has. We don't know what the Russians have. We don't know what the Chinese have. We don't know what the Indians or South Americans have or the Africans, because UFOs are everywhere. They don't just fly over the U.S. because truth, justice, and the American way. No, they're all over the place, and they make mistakes and they crash just like everybody else. And so this material is everywhere. And so you have to think, oh gosh, now we have ships that can go faster than the speed of light and make left-hand turns at 10,000 miles an hour. What an advantage that would be in a battle. No. Other people have technology too. And we'd be caught with our drawers down around our ankles out in the cold if they were to use this technology against us. Now, there's extensive references also made to the study and application of what tests called metamaterial. I said it could be used to slow down light. And ostensibly, in the lab, under certain energetic conditions, it can slow light down to a standstill. You know what that means? No photons move. And if no photons move, it means the ship is invisible. You can't pick it up because the rods and cones in your eyes never get the photons. They never reach our eyes. They're slowed down by this technology. So a ship, no matter how big, size of a fighter or the size of an aircraft carrier would just disappear because they could slow light down. And that is remarkable. We could have a whole fleet of ships sitting in orbit around our planet, and we wouldn't be able to see it. Thank you very much, Michelle. She's doing my job for me. She says, only a third of likes. Hit the like button, folks. It's easy to do if you're watching this on YouTube. It's just, hit that right there. That helps because you know what YouTube does when they get a certain number of these? Is they say, wow, this program is getting an extraordinary number of likes. Let's put it on the suggested list. That means the next time you log into YouTube, you just click the little YouTube app on your phone. Guess what comes up as a suggested video on the right-hand side or on the lower third? We do. That's generated by likes. Not that I would ever be a YouTube star. I'm too old, and I'm not wearing any makeup, and I'm not, comely. This material may induce invisibility, of course, and it can keep itself from being picked up by radar because it can compress electromagnetic energy. Imagine how important that would be if you were a fleet of bombers flying over someone else's country and they were scanning the skies with radar automatically. Not only would you not show up visibly, but you wouldn't show up on radar because you'd be compressing all the energy that strikes the ship. That's a good idea. It's a good idea. We should give Michelle McNamer a wrench. That's a good idea. Let me see if I can slide up there. Where is Michelle? There she is. Let's see here if I can do this. Maybe I have to right-click. Maybe I can't do it there. Duh. Sorry. So sorry. I have to be in YouTube to do it, and I'm not. I'm in an integration program that allows me to pull all this together. But I'll take care of it. When we go to break, I'll take care of it. So this metamaterial can be tuned to different resonances with a very small amount of stimulus. They have something called metallic glass. It's sort of like transparent aluminum. Metal is crystalline in its solid state, but the crystals are all random, and that's why light doesn't pass through metal. But when the crystals are aligned, like they are with silica or, say, carbon in a diamond or plastics like carbonite, then light can pass through it. It can be invisible. It can be at least transparent. And that is pretty amazing because amorphous metals, though, are, as I said, very abrasive. They're very chaotic in the sense that light photons cannot go through it. It makes a very good block. And when it's all aligned, this material is much, much stronger and it's much lighter than any existing metal the way we make it, heating it up and melting it and smashing it between colander rolls or stretching it out. We, in our genius, create this chaos in metals. But if it could be injection molded like plastic with no rivets, no seams, no joining, it could be smooth, which, by the way, is the way a lot of UFOs are reported as appearing, and will never corrode, it'll never rust. Imagine using a single razor blade for the rest of your life because it stays super sharp forever. It never corrodes. A golf club so springy that it can drive a ball further than any pro ever has. An artificial hip implant that performs better than any real hip. A cell phone case, indestructible. A car that would last forever, like they do in Southern California. So there's a contract that Bigelow has. Bigelow is the ones that have created the inflatable spacecraft, okay? And it was granted under the auspices of an official government UFO study. The contract was for Bigelow to construct specialized modified facilities to hold the material for testing. And under the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, the UFO study effort was called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. They always think in terms of threat. That's where the money comes from. It ran for some years and under more than one name. And according to sources, it remains in operation to this very day. I don't know the name of the program to this very day, but it still exists. Now, what's inside these specially modified facilities that requires such contracted technical services? What is the nature of this anomalous debris, and what are the properties that it requires shielding from us? We don't know. The FOIA official responded to this request. His name was Steve Tumisky. And he explains that the DIA has identified 5 documents totaling 154 pages that are responsive to the FOIA request. The extraterrestrial material study should generate thousands of pages relevant to the request, not just 154. The DIA cites exemptions 3 and 6 of the federal FOIA regulations as reasons why they won't release the rest of the information. Exemption 3 allows withholding of information prohibited from disclosure by federal statute and leaves no discretion on the issue due to potential harm to, of course, national security. Exemption 6 applies to records that involve personal privacy. It incorporates a balancing test that weighs any privacy interest against the public interest in disclosure. It's kind of interesting. I don't really know the documents that are withheld. We can speculate. There are some previous reports which I think are vague and ambiguous. I'm not going to mention them. And people want to know from Bigelow, where is the damn debris? Where's the stuff? We want to see it. Put it at Smithsonian. Put it on parade. Take it on tour. Let me see it. Bigelow Aerospace was the brainchild of Robert Bigelow, a hospitality industry billionaire with a strong interest in things cosmic, the other dimensional, and the extraterrestrial. Bigelow associated the prominent people such as Senator Harry Reid and former rock star Tom DeLonge. Bigelow has had previous mystery ventures, such as the nonprofit now defunct National Institute for Discovery Science. He was also at one time associated with the famous Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Bigelow brought a unique blend of cash and other resources, entrepreneurship, an interest in above-normal investigation. In 1999, Bigelow founded Bigelow Aerospace, developing crewed space complexes and inflatable habitats. Very small when they're launched. When they get into space, they feed the atmosphere into them. They blow up like a balloon inside an exoskeleton, having a very thick, multi-layer Kevlar outer skin that is basically impervious to micrometeorites, which plague the heck out of metal-skinned ships. They're light, easy to launch, and spacious. And they're being used right now in space. And they're lasting better than the metallic ships. And they're insulated quite well. So he's been successful. And he is intricately involved in the Artemis program and in the Gateway Project, which if you read my book, Asteroid Mining, the Future of Energy, you would know about the Artemis program and the Gateway programs, which are designed to create a cislunar space with habitat, not just in orbit, but also on the planet, and also able to move from cislunar space, which is roughly 300,000 miles around Earth, taking in the 2 Lagrangian points and the moon, and the space between the moon and Mars, creating way stations along the way so that ships don't have to carry all the parts and all the fuel and energy that they need to get from one place to the other, and being able to maybe also work in repairing and replacing satellites so that we don't end up with a train wreck in orbit. And it isn't self-funding yet. Just wanted to let you know that. So there's a lot of money that pours into this and not much money that comes out of it right now. And that, of course, makes prime carvings for Virtual Joe and his hungry cohorts that are looking for cash out of the American people and taxpayers. What is that? JCLP81 says, had kind of this whole crew fall with him, so he was pretty much organized from the get-go. Yeah, an easy guy to follow. Somebody that has cash, who has entrepreneurial spirit, who is willing to push things to the limit, has the ability to get approval from the government to get his stuff into space. Be nice for me to get approval from the government to put my electric trucks on the road, but I don't have a previous empire from which to draw such resources. Robert Bigelow himself does not answer emails. Probably doesn't even own a cell phone. He's in his late 70s. His director, his security director, and his lawyer are refusing to speak to anyone. So all of this is remaining secret, and we pray that he doesn't take it to his grave. Because I think somewhere in there, and I'm kind of catching this a little bit in the chat room, and I also hear it from other people, somewhere in there is, I think, a solution to our current energy woes in this country. I don't want to call it free energy, but maybe it's ultra high efficiency energy. And maybe it's the ability to store energy, and maybe it's the ability to access energy that we don't currently access. Right now we use electricity. We like it. We can measure it, store it, generate it. We can capacitize it. We can induce it. But we have really no idea what it is. It enters our dimension and does our bidding endlessly. We're doing it right now over the internet, and all of us are enjoying whatever pontification happens to pop in my mind because of it. But wouldn't it be neat if there was another form of energy, something that we didn't have to do nearly as much work to get to come into our dimension? Yeah, it would make a good weapon, but we don't want to use it as a weapon. We want to use it as a source of energy. And we want to save our planet. We want to be able to provide enough energy that no one on this planet has to go to war in order to have enough energy to boil their water for rice. And that being said, we also want to make sure that enough knowledge is imparted to every man, woman, and child on this planet that they have the wherewithal to understand their impact on the overall society. That if 1 billion people have 10 children each, we will very soon, in 9 months, have 5 billion people on the earth. You understand the burden that this would place upon the living things of this planet. There is a requirement for balance in any society of biological beings, if they're bacteria, or if they're multi-celled animals, or if they're wild animals, or if they're people. A certain number of people balance to the energy and food and shelter that are available in that habitat. We're out of that. And we could continue to build apartments all the way across the vacant land in America. We could build all the way across the Sahara, all the way across the jungles of Africa. Earth could easily support 20, 25 billion people if it was managed correctly. But that isn't what happens. Our economic system, for what it is and because of what it is, we have huge disparity. I'm not talking about the difference between the people making $17 an hour and the people making $70 an hour. I'm not talking about that difference at all. I'm not even talking about the difference between people that make minimum wage and people that make $100 an hour. There are people that make $200, $300 an hour. I'm not even talking about those people. What I'm talking about are the people that are so wealthy that their interest on their money generates so much money they could not spend it in 1,000 lifetimes. That's what I'm talking about. Once you get to a certain point, with individual wealth, it becomes moot. It becomes something that turns you into a Bill Gates. Bill Gates has no respect for human life whatsoever. He would just as soon kill everyone on the earth down to 500 million people, just like the Georgia Guidestones say, as long as he is one of the ones that gets to remain. That's not capitalism. That's something totally different. The idea that you get to grow what you want to, eat all of that, and then sell the excess for tires or gasoline or clothes or sugar or whatever else it is you need for your household, that's capitalism. You own your own labor, and you give it as you see fit. That's capitalism. The issue comes when other people own your labor. Other people own everything that you have, what you live in, what you drive. That's where the issue comes in, and that is a system that is unsustainable. It's sustainable for them, of course. Socialists love socialism. They love it. But the people who live under socialism are oppressed in slavery and kept ignorant, which is a crime worse than torture itself. To hold truth back from someone is torture. On this day, a Valentine's Day, everyone should know that more than any other day, probably. When we come back, top of the hour, and we talk a little bit more about the silver short squeeze, there are big forces here, the biggest the world has ever known. And it's going to be interesting to see how they negotiate this. But if you own silver, you need to listen. If you don't own silver, you should, and you need to listen. So we'll cover that when we get back to the top of the hour with the truth frequency people taking a break in about a minute. And then when we get done with the silver squeeze, we're going to talk about America the Predictable, which is the title of tonight's program. That will be the lead story in the newsletter that goes out. And if you're not subscribing to the newsletter, shame on you, because it's free. It's free, and you can get it for absolutely nothing. All you have to do is go to the website, click on the Get the Newsletter, and it's two things. Your name, your email address, done. It costs nothing, and I will send it to you twice a week, Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, and it'll help you stand in the right place and avoid what's about to fall. We'll take a quick break with the TFR people in about 10 seconds. Then we'll come back at the top of the hour with them. Watching the TFR chat room, not much is going on there. Everybody is on the stream, so we do what we do because we have to build that archive, and it goes out through TuneIn and iHeart and all kinds of other audio sources, and TalkStream Live. Okay, there's their music, and we'll let them go take a break. Now, chat room people. Good question. SyncX says, is silver actually going to be worth a lot? That's kind of a lot of question in a very few words. Silver is worth more than what the dollars belie, okay? Silver is used in industry. Silver is not an investment normally. It is a place where you park money. It is to be held. And yes, you could turn it to cash pretty easily. You can go right down to the pawn shop, give him your 10-ounce bars, and he's going to write you a check for $300 or whatever it's selling for today. You could do that. You could turn it into cash if you need cash. What the silver is designed to do, from my point of view, I'm not a financial analyst, is to protect your cash. It's not to protect your silver. Silver is what it is. It's eternal. It's always going to be what it's worth. And goods and services. But cash is not. Cash is subject to all kinds of forces. And almost none of them are good, especially when someone like Virtual Joe is at the helm. With Virtual Joe, you end up with what we call inflationary forces. And inflationary forces are really not what you want to see. This is where government runs the presses. They print money. They print more money than what is in the system. And it's not just the paper money. Okay, it's the fiat money. It's the Yellenomics, Janet Yellen, Yellenomics. What she does is she has an unbelievable amount of liquidity at her disposal with the U.S. Treasury. It's really quite off the chain. They could use the liquidity to pay down the national debt, but they don't because the liquidity is very powerful for them. It allows them to do things like give $2,000 for every single person that makes less than $75,000 a year. Boom, done. They got the money. It's there. They should pay down the national debt, just like you would pay down your debt if you had a windfall. You wouldn't go out and blow it. You wouldn't go out and spend it, buy a boat or a side-by-side or a new Harley-Davidson motorcycle. You'd pay down your debt. That's what you should do. That's what any responsible economic system does, except the federal government. It just spends more and spends more and spends more. And what the Green New Deal is green new spending. It is so much spending you can't believe it. So the answer to your question is silver holds value. It is a place to park cash. If you're sitting around with $2,000 or $3,000 a month in your checking account, drawing no interest, you have enough to pay your normal bills, but that's your normal float in your checking account. You should probably put a quarter of that at least into silver bars and keep it at your house because you're just protecting your cash. That's all. That's what it's for. Gold is a little more not as shorted as silver. Silver is quite shorted. It can't really be allowed to go up too high. Let's go ahead and bring TFR back in now. Okay, I think they're live. It can't really be allowed to go up too high because Morgan Stanley has the biggest silver vault in the world. All right, top of the hour, break music. Okay, a lot of people don't know what a short squeeze is, so I'm going to explain it to you very quickly. Morgan Stanley has the largest silver vault in the world, which means it's packed with silver. Millions and millions of troy ounces of silver is in there. The trouble is that all that silver is spoken for about 100 times over. Morgan Stanley should be long on silver. That would be the ethical thing to do because they have the silver in their vault. It would make sense to have it be worth as much as it should be. But it is worth about 1/75th of what gold is. That is not good. We don't like to see spreads like that between precious metals of 75 to 1. It has been 40 to 1, 30 to 1, and although not quite as unhealthy, it is something that is a reality. It means that silver is being shorted. It's being marketed at less than market value through what are called options. They sell options. Silver is going to go down. People buy those options. And if it goes down, they make money. If it goes up, then Morgan Stanley has to deliver the silver. That's why they can't let the price go up. That's called the squeeze. So while the markets and the SEC regulators, that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, and yes, even Maxine Waters, have been obsessing over the various rolling short squeezes that are loosely orchestrated by Redditors, people that are on Reddit, and they're communicating about various stocks that are shorted, like AMC, or recently it was GameStop. And the Robinhood Raiders, because although you can't trade stocks on Reddit, you can trade stocks very easily on Robinhood. Robinhood is what we call the loser's board. It means you can trade without a fee, okay? And the reason you can trade without a fee is there's no financial advisor, there's no liability sharer or any of that in there. It's just you. So you're a loser. you're picking individual stocks and you think you're smart and you're going to lose all your money. So Robinhood was created so that losers would have direct access to the market without going through Mass Mutual or Fidelity or Ameritrade or, they're fee traders, but they also have analytical engines that allow you to watch trends and act on recommendations. You don't get that with Robinhood. With Robinhood, it's just you're the brains behind it. That's why it's called the losers board. But when these people coordinate, what they can do is they can watch the stocks that are being systematically shorted. We call that naked shorting. It means that the person that's selling the short contracts does not actually own the stock. Typically what happens when you short a stock is you borrow the stock from the shareholder and then you sell it short into the market. If it goes down, you make money. If it goes up, you have to return those shares to that shareholder and you lose your money. That's just the way it is. But if you don't own the stock, if the stock never existed in the first place, if you made the stock up out of nothing, that's called naked short trading. The shares don't exist. You didn't borrow them from anybody. You just created them because you have a seat on an exchange. And you sold the stock short. And people bought it because they said, wow, what a deal. I can buy this at a discount. And they do buy a bunch of money. And guess who gets the money? You do, not the company. You put it all in your pocket. And if the stock goes down, you win. You don't have to deliver the shares. You can pocket the money and go your merry way. But if the stock is bumped up, and that occurs when people on Robinhood and Reddit get together and they buy shares. Instead of selling shares, they buy shares at market price. And what happens is that bumps the price up. When it does, it catches the short traders naked with their pants down around their ankles. And guess what they have to do by law? The regulators make them do this. They have to buy the shares. But they don't exist. Where are they going to get them? They get them from the market. Who's the market? You are. You Robinhooders, you're the market. So what happens is the price begins to go up, and it goes up rapidly. From $2, $4, $8, $100, $200, $300, $400, it can go up. And when that happens, ordinary people with a couple thousand shares, maybe $8,000 involved or $5,000 involved, are now all of a sudden worth $1 million. You have no idea how many millionaires were created by the short squeeze on GameStop. A lot. A lot. These people paid off houses, paid off student loans, bought new cars. It was a huge boost. Put it this way. The hedge fund that got caught lost $46 billion. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. $46 billion. That's what a short squeeze is. It happened with Tesla as well, Tesla Motors. Tesla Motors would not exist if it was not for the short squeeze on Citicorp, who was naked shorting their stock in early 2000s, 2008, 2009. So it can happen also in pot stocks and what we call penny stocks. These are stocks that sell for under $1. It's a very difficult market to play in. You buy a stock that's worth a dime and it goes to $20. You've made a really good return on your investment. It's rare, but it happens. And it usually happens after the short traders have already had their way with the stock, or after the initial investors that came in and formed that company and gave themselves like 20 million shares of stock. They put, let's say, $4 million into the company to get it started up. And in exchange, they got 20 million shares of stock. And what they did is they released all kinds of great press on the company. Wow, we have a new cure for AIDS. We have a new cure for COVID. We have a new fuel additive that will double your mileage in your vehicle. Some great press. And what happens is people go, wow, what's the company that's responsible for that? Oh, ABCDX. And they go buy ABCDX shares, and the shares go up. And then what happens is those initial investors with the 20 million shares, they sell their shares into the market. and they make $20 million back for their $4 million investment in roughly 90 days. Of course, when they sell their shares back into the market, it drives the price back down, and now you have a penny stock again. A stock that went shooting up in the NASDAQ to $3, $4, $5 is now back to 2 cents, 5 cents, 6 cents, something like that. They made their money. And if the naked shorters get wind that that's going to happen, they'll naked short the stock as well. Now, the initial investors don't like this because it drives the price down too fast and they don't get their return. So they try to make it quick. They try to get in, get out. It's called the pump and dump, okay? And then the short traders can look at it and go ahead and delist it the rest of the way and make their money. It is a very tricky market to play. And if you're going to play with small amounts of money, I am not going to advise you. I've seen people make money. Buy it 6 cents, sell it $2 or $26. Yes, I've seen that. But it does not happen very often. It is not something that you want to say you're good at, a day trader of penny stocks. By the way, Brian, thank you very, very much for the generous contribution on Top Chat on YouTube. That is there at the very bottom. You can see a little rectangle with the $sign in it. That's Top Chat. You click on that. It will highlight your question. He says, passing the plate, everybody. Peace and love all. Thank you very much. Happy Valentine's Day, Brian. And that is a big help here. Helps not so much to keep the lights on. I do that. But all that money goes toward the North Pole Inner Earth Expedition. And I know I promised in January I was going to add phone equipment to this program so that I could take calls during the Wednesday broadcast, and I have not done it yet. The Sunday broadcast, we do take phone calls. I don't get them very often. I'm watching the call board right now, and there are no callers. So do I want to invest the money and put phone lines on the Wednesday night program? I don't know. We'll see. I like the chat room. It's pretty quick, and I can see what you guys are saying, and you do not have to expose yourself to all the other listeners that are hearing this. Some 2,000 people will listen to this program eventually. So, yes, you can jump in there and you can take advantage of this, but this short squeeze that I'm particularly talking about is in silver. Okay? And there are some excellent drivers for this. If you want to watch the price of silver a little bit, there's the end of the pandemic and reopening of economies. There's the uptick in global economic growth. Remember the roaring 20s we were talking about in 2019. There's the end of the trade war and manufacturing recession. There's ultra-loose monetary policies across the world. I don't look to see that happen. I look to see a movement away from the dollar as a reserve currency. Of course, there's the weakening of the U.S. dollar, which will drive the price of the dollar down, which will encourage foreign investment in the United States and allow farmers and other manufacturers to sell their stuff overseas, thus increasing their market. One of the drawbacks of having a very strong dollar. Fiscal measures for infrastructure like roads. The highway fund is notoriously corrupt, but they spend oodles and tons of money. And if you're into asphalt or concrete or rebar, you can always make money in those stocks. Financial inflows to hedge inflation and bond equity correlation. I don't see that happening. Financial inflows to follow asset momentum. That's probably going to happen. Metals for new infrastructure, like for EVs, solar panels, and batteries. That's where the silver comes in. This is where those people that are long on silver, it's probably going to be good because demand is going to go up. Supply is rather fixed. It costs a little bit to mine silver, and it is not that mineable in the sense that federal lands are not open to this kind of mining just yet. But it is not going to be allowed to go up because if it goes up too high, Morgan Stanley is going to get caught with all these naked shorts and all these regular shorts, and they're going to have to pay up, which means Morgan Stanley will disappear as a bank, and all of the counterparty banks will disappear with them or really, really take a severe hit. We don't want to see that happen. Morgan Stanley doesn't want to see that happen. You don't want to see that happen. That being said, keep in mind, these short contracts, they are they age out. You can't have a short contract forever. It's a certain fixed period of time, 90 days, 6 months, a year, 2 years, something like that. What Morgan Stanley needs to do is to have a little self-discipline, fiscal responsibility, and stop selling the short contracts. Let them age out. Let them age out. Yeah, they're going to lose their money probably, but we don't care. They're hedge funds. Screw them. Screw them. They're not going to lose all their money like in a squeeze, but they're going to lose their money on the contracts. And then stop selling them. And then what will happen is silver will normalize. It'll go up to, say, 30 times less than the price of silver, which is, roughly $400 an ounce? Or $40, $50 an ounce? $60 an ounce? $70 an ounce? We'd like to see that. A lot of us bought in when silver was $17, $20, $25 an ounce. We'd like to see $200, $300 an ounce. It would make sense. It would hurt some of the other industries like solar panels and EVs and electronic displays for computers, because all of those use silver in the chemistry, liquid crystal chemistry. But those are the forces. I could go on into the crude oil and some of the other things, but I like the economic science because it deals in the mathematics. Excuse me while I dig the sand out of my eye. But I could see where I could lose you in that analysis. So what I'm going to do right now, because I do have quite a few listeners on DLive, I'm going to give you 5 minutes or so if you're switching back and forth between YouTube and DLive and Twitch and whatever. See how many listeners I have on DLive just to make it fun. Quite a few. I'd say 25% of our listening audience is on DLive right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack some lemons in here, and then in 5 minutes, I'm going to give some away. So let me, hang on a second here. I'm going to put in, okay, that's 100. Let's jack it up to 150. All right, we're into 150 lemons that are in just money. It's cryptocurrency. In 5 minutes, we're going to give it away on DLive. Let's talk a little bit about America the Predictable. It seems like this would be an easy historic fact to accept. However, it's very common for the state propagandists, you know who I'm talking about, right? ABC, NBC, CNN, state propagandists. And the establishment shills. A shill is somebody who willingly propagates a lie in order to prop up the propagandists. That's what a shill is. It's different than, say, a troll. A troll is somebody that just writes name calling against people. Shills will just put out information that backs up the propagandists in the media. And they do it to cloud the argument because they want it to look like everybody thinks this way. Why are you so stupid? Why don't you join the crowd, join the herd? And the conflict between the political left, which we call the establishment party, the Global Syndicates, and the conservatives and patriots is awash in this misdirection. It's a game they play all the time. And if demons and global syndicates, these global syndicate soldiers, were not trying to take away our individual and inherent liberties, then we conservatives and moderates would have no reason to fight, now would we? But they are, and that's why we feel their hands around our neck and their hands in our pockets. The political left and the global syndicates are the only people consistently using censorship. We don't censor. You want to say what you want to say, with the exception of Flat Earth, you're welcome here. This is mob intimidation. It's violence. It's hate. It's economic ransom. It's subversion. And it is government oppression to get what they want. And what they want is control. There's no denying it. You all know it. I know it. That's why you're here. Again, let's think about this for a second. Who are the real villains in this story? The people who want to be left alone, to live their lives in quiet freedom? No. Or the people that want to forcefully impose their will on the world by any means necessary? Yeah. They call it progress. That's why they're called progressives. They could call it futurism. They could call it the Great Reset. They could call it Utopia. But there is no getting around the reality that demons and global syndicates have a vision for the world that is simply, distinctly hostile to you, to love, to peace, to family, to Christ, to independent thought. And what is worse is they think they're the good guys. They think they're the good guys. Conservatives and constitutionalists are monsters to them. Why? Because we exist and because we refuse to comply. We're not wearing the mask. We're not taking the vaccine. We're not going to be quiet. We're not going to stay home. We're going to go assemble. We're going to go to the bar. We're going to go to the restaurant. We're going to go hiking. And we're going to drive our gasoline-powered cars. They think we're wicked. In recent months, the word terrorist and insurrectionist has been used to describe us. 75 million Trump voters have been called insurrectionists. The Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, introduced in Congress this year, goes even further, and it specifically targets conservative activist groups as the primary threat to the stability of the U.S. government. Can you believe it? Have you ever heard such nonsense in your whole life? It's about to get very real, Earth Explorers. Demons are still calling the protest in the Capitol building an attack on democracy by terrorists and white supremacists. I was there. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm white. I am a supreme being, but I'm not a white supremacist, not by any means. All right, I said I was going to give away some lemons. Let's give them away right now. Here we go. Ready? Boom. All right, they're going out there. It takes about 30 seconds for the algorithm to select which of the 25% of the listening audience is on DLive right now is going to receive the lemons. And there are some consistent winners here. I don't know how you guys do it. You have some thing that you're doing, some dance, some incantation that you're doing out there. You always win, but here it goes. Here it goes. 4 seconds, and then we'll find out. Here it is. All right, the winners are James Bright, 76.3 lemons, Michael, 1973, 44.2 lemons, and a new one, Vaughn Kinney, 32.2 lemons. How about that? That's real money. And that just for listening. So you didn't not only have to spend anything, you made money by listening to America Free Radio. And we're so happy that you are part of our family. And we trust that you will tell your friends about us. If people walking unarmed into a building and then leaving quietly after an hour is terrorism and insurrection, then what would they call it if we actually physically defended ourselves against the usurpation of our civil rights? These are labels. Some of us in the, let's just call us the alternative media. We're not the alt-right. We're not the alt-left. We're certainly not the fake stream news. We really are the mainstream news because you are the mainstream. You make up the majority. You make up the majority and you listen to this program. That makes us alike, okay? We are the mainstream news now. And we knew that the numerous pieces of national security and surveillance legislation passed under Baby Bush and, of course, Barack Obama, supposedly aimed at Islamic terrorists, would one day be used against us. That's why we didn't want to approve it. That's why the National Defense Authorization Act is so freaking scary. We think, oh, yeah, we need to use it against terrorists because they're threatening our society, our peace and tranquility, joy and happiness. But the language is whoever They determine fits that mold. That's who it's used against. We were called conspiracy theorists 15 years ago for suggesting this stuff. And now we're prophetic. But the mainstream, they're never going to admit it. We will. We told you. The argument on the other side of the aisle is that the conservatives represent an outdated ideal. We are old-fashioned. We are no longer viable, okay? It's a philosophy which disrupts the betterment of human society. But is this really true? And who gets to decide who benefits society? Who gets to decide who's betterment and who's not? Huh? Are the tent cities in Orange County, California, betterment of society? Really? Are the burnt out husks of former stores and buildings in Kenosha, are they for the betterment of society? Are the windows that are broken and the doors kicked in and the people punched in the face and fires lit and windows smashed and people shot in the head in Portland, Oregon, is that for the betterment of society? Some principles, like the liberties embodied in natural law and outlined in the U.S. Constitution, like the pursuit of happiness, they never become outdated, ever. They exist in the heart of mankind, and they come from God, not from government. They cannot be erased. They cannot be undone. They are inherent, and they are eternal. Now, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a communist organization through and through, and others within the, quote, establishment, accuse us, people that believe in free speech, that have radio programs like mine, they call us of aiming for conflict against the government. And I'm here to tell them that is exactly what we're doing. Because when the government is wrong, it says right in the Constitution, it is our duty to rise up and overthrow that government. It says it right in the document. We are arming ourselves because the establishment is arming against us. Yes, we are a threat to being taken over. We're only a threat to political and corporate criminals who use subversion and violence to wrest freedom from the hands of good people like us. We're not the aggressors. We're the defenders. I'm not afraid to openly admit it here. But I got to tell you, if 150 million Americans that own guns and the 400 million arms and the 1.2 trillion rounds of ammunition, we're in the wrong hands. We're in the hands of violent people. You'd know about it. Quick break with TFR. If we were the problem, you would know about it. But we aren't the problem. We aren't rising up in arms. We're defending when it's necessary. Every facet of full-blown tyranny in history, every one that we can identify since the earth cooled, is being implemented in the U.S. and around the world in one stage or another, right? And it's done like this. A fascist communist state is being established piece by piece right now as we speak. Some people are actually saying in interviews that I see, man on the street interviews, well, that's not really such a bad thing. We're kind of a socialist society anyway. I mean, there's social media and there's Social Security. So see, we're a socialist society already. God, people can be so stupid. Mass surveillance of the public. It's now the norm. If you're not seeing it, your eyes are closed. Every intersection you come to has a surveillance camera. Every mile, just about, of freeway has a surveillance camera. You think you can look down the highway and say, nope, no cops down there. I'm going to nail it. 95 miles an hour blazing down the freeway. You think nobody's watching? They're watching you. They have your license number. They have the color of your car. They know how fast you're going. They know exactly where you are. All they would have to do is dispatch a unit and pull you over. They already have you on film. The fact that you're getting away with it just simply means the police are stretched too thin, or they don't want to mess with you. Because if they did, they would. Every time you walk down the sidewalk, your face is being recognized. Every government building you'll go around, every bank you go into, your face is being photographed. You wear this hat and you keep your head down low like this in your car, this is what they pick up. Can they pick it all up? No, not really. You know why they don't want you to wear glasses or a beard or whatever when you take a passport picture? Because the facial recognition software can't tell who you are. If you go to Hong Kong, you could see people wearing face jewelry. Face jewelry. They wear like gold discs on their forehead or on their cheeks, or a chain maybe underneath their eyes. You know why they do that? So the facial recognition software can't determine who they are. They're disguising themselves for the surveillance state. Economic lockdowns, they're now the norm. They're now the norm. You know what you have to do when you think, hey, let's go out to eat tonight? You know what you have to do? You have to call the restaurant. And you have to ask them, are you guys dining in tonight? I mean, if we come, can we sit down? And they might say yes, but there's a 1 hour wait because we only have 9 tables that we can use. The other 30 tables, because of antisocial distancing. And have you ever tried to go to the bank lately? To the bank to get something notarized or make a deposit or withdrawal, other than the anytime teller outside? Forget about it. You're not going in that bank. You have to have an appointment, and all appointments are taken for the month. Let's bring TFR back in now. That's what it's like. We are in a lockdown society.
I've been waiting for this moment since my first breath in. Never would have thought I'd be afraid to begin, but here I am, the edge of the water, wondering if I can swim. Never seem to notice all the days pass through. In this final moment, I'm still chasing the truth. I want an explanation why I can't stay here forever in my youth. And if I press on, will you wait? Will you wait for me forever? Or would it be wrong to ask you to come with? Tell me, will you wait?
Yes, I hope you do. I hope you do wait. Because we're coming. We're coming. Hope is on the way. And by the way, I want to let you know today, Happy Valentine's Day. Jen and Jenny and everybody else that's out there, all my friends, Happy Valentine's Day. Just love to have you guys on the planet. Your energy is so fantastic. Boo and everybody else. And yes, I promise I'll add a moderator. If I get over to YouTube tonight, I'll add the new moderator because she did such a great job in vouching for us, and we're happy to have her here. Bonnie, congratulations on your win tonight. It's very good for everybody. It's good for us and our life force, JCLP81. So let's see if... let me go over these rules, because there's an essential set of rules of tyranny. And if you're aware of the rules, you can avoid them, or you can take action to mitigate it, to reduce it. Rule number 1 is keep them afraid. Please don't be afraid. Be aware, be situationally aware, but don't be afraid, because fear like this leads to what we call agoraphobia. No, it doesn't mean you're afraid of agors. It means you're afraid to go outside. You're afraid to go outside. And you know what feeds into this? Wearing the mask. Wearing the mask. When you put the mask on, you become incognito, in a sense. Because humans, we're communicating beings. We're social beings. We like to get together. And whether we speak to one another with words, or we speak to one another with our face, with our facial expressions, we are social beings. 70% of what is communicated by one human to another human is not the words that are said. It's the way the words are said. If they're muffled behind a mask like this, or you're not allowed to add that smile, you're not allowed, the person's not allowed to see you saying those words to them. Even if you're in a loud nightclub and two people meet eyes 15, 20 feet away, it's impossible to say something the other person could hear unless you scream at the top of your lungs. But you could just smile like that, and a lot is said. All that is cut off with the mask. It's the design. It's designed to put you in solitary confinement. It's designed not only to make you afraid of ridicule, so you will wear the mask in the grocery store so nobody will say, sir, are you sure you don't want to wear a mask? You don't want confrontation? You don't want to be identified anymore? Then you don't want the person to come up and say, can I help you find something? I mean, that's intrusive enough, but to have somebody come up to you and say, can you put that mask up over your nose, please? Or I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. I mean, you want to punch the guy in the face when that happens, right? The point is, you're being made afraid. You're being made agoraphobic. Stop. Don't allow that to happen. If you go incognito, you're not there. You're afraid of being there. The other rule 2 is to keep them isolated. That's why it's called antisocial distancing. Oh, they call it social distancing. I mean, the trick is that you don't need to make everybody wear the mask. All you need to do is tell the people that are wearing the mask that the people who aren't wearing a mask are trying to kill them. And you've done the job. You don't have to be the cops. The person in aisle 5 next to the mayonnaise can be the cop for you in the way he or she looks at you and the way they sneer at you. You son of a bitch. Why aren't you wearing the mask? Are you trying to kill me? Get over there by the white rice where you belong. I'm just saying, you isolate people one from another. You don't see group hugs anymore. Group hugs are verboten. You can't do that. That's a super spreader event. Number 3 is to keep them desperate. Get out. Get your shopping done. Get back in the car and get back home. Keep them desperate. Number 4 is send out the jackboots. Make an example out of some people. Baba Susie, good point. She said the worst part of these masks is that they have stifled laughter. No one is supposed to converse with anyone, but don't even try to laugh. That's a spreader right there. You don't want to cheer. You don't want to whistle through your, using your fingers to whistle. You don't want to laugh at somebody. That would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're spreading virus all over me. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Baba Susie. It's the laugh. Automatic Sky, I'm with you. I won't wear it. Well, I have to wear it at work or I don't get paid. And it would be a tragedy to have me fired because then I can't affect the universe the way I am right now. Number 5 is blame everything on the truth seekers. Number 6 is encourage citizen spies. Like the star of The Mandalorian, Gina, she made a reference that having citizens, neighbors spying on neighbors is not unlike what went on in World War II with neighbors spying on the Jews. There are Jews living next to me. Please come and get them so I can have their fine house. That's the reward, That's the reward. If you turn in a Jew, the reward is you get to take their apartment. You get to take their house or their car. And meanwhile, they take the Jew out in the street, strip him naked, take all their money and their art and their gold and everything they have in the bank, roll them over on their back, take a rifle butt, knock the gold teeth out of their mouth, and ship them off to a camp. Yeah. Oh, no, it was real. It was real. And rule number 7, make them accept the unacceptable. Those are the rules of tyranny. It's happening right now all around us. So here we are on the edge of an event which the Liberty Movement has been predicting for well over a decade. And we've been predicting it for a long, long time. If you don't believe me, go read the books. And we've been preparing for it. We've been preparing your mind for it. We tell you, make sure you have a couple months of food. Make sure you have a full tank of gas at all times. You know, make sure you have the bare necessities to survive. And we know that it will be painted as the worst thing you could possibly do. Oh, you're hoarding gasoline, you're hoarding food, you're keeping away from the poor of the world, you're living in an unsustainable way, you must live hand to mouth, and the hand is us. Yes. So are we supremacists? No. Do we wish harm on anyone else? No. Do the global syndicates and the demons really think that they can take 74 million plus Americans and marginalize us all with a word like terrorist or insurrectionist? Yeah, they do. They do. Perhaps it is what they expect. Maybe they think they want us to fight. Maybe they're trying to make us fight. Maybe all of these attacks on conservatives are an attempt to provoke us to fight. It's like a catch-22. If you don't do it, you're oppressed. If you do it, you're an insurrectionist. I mean, we're damned if we defend ourselves, and we're certainly damned if we do nothing, right? If this is their strategy, then they must assume they can control the outcome of such a revolution, and they cannot. Those people that start revolutions are never, ever the ones who finish it. And deep down, I don't think slavery is what you guys want. I don't think you want to be ruled over. When you think of rule of law, you don't think of rule by law. You think of rule of law, right? That law applies to everyone. And if it did, we wouldn't be in this mess. If the 34 or 35 people that the law should have applied to, going all the way back to the Clinton administration, had actually applied, we wouldn't be in this mess. It's a small number. Oh, yes. There are thousands of pedophiles. There are hundreds of murderers and rapists. Of course, all of those. But I'm talking to 34 or 35 main names. The Obama, the Clinton, the Brennan, the Clapper, the Rhodes, the Rice, the Samantha Power, the Eric Holder, all of these individuals that literally broke the law. People died. People were murdered. People were left to die. If those individuals were held accountable by the law, we would not be in this situation. We would not be in this situation. We wouldn't have a fence around our Congress. We would not have a virtual president. And we would not be wearing masks right now or ever. So we should give righteousness a chance, maybe. I mean, consider that in the past year, the radical left, these global syndicate leaders, whose champions are the global media empire, okay? They have succeeded in doing a lot of things. They succeeded in indicting the freest, most welcoming, and least racist nation on the earth as irredeemably racist. They've incited violent Marxist revolutionaries to riot, vandalize, loot, and burn America's major cities. They're abandoning their former safe and legal and rare stance on abortion in favor of wanton celebration of late-term abortion up to and including the moment of birth. They're encouraging innocent children to irreversibly ruin their lives by chemically altering their sex. They're using the COVID pandemic as a bio-hurricane as a cover for imposing unprecedented totalitarian control over Americans. And they're gaslighting an entire nation by perpetrating the most wide-ranging, egregious, and in-your-face election fraud in U.S. history while pretending disenfranchised American voters who simply want a fair and impartial investigation are the crazy ones, trying to steal the election from Joe Biden. And that's just for starters. As America's once great middle class becomes smashed through endless COVID lockdowns, a wealthy and privileged globalist elite is not only growing ever richer by the second and more powerful by the hour, but also strategically deploying COVID as a pretext for engineering what they call this great reset of the world. They're going to replace capitalism with socialism, which is just the fuzzy dice on the dashboard of communism. This is neither conspiracy theory nor partisan conjecture, Earth explorers. The reset movement's leaders openly brag about this. What I just described to you comes right off their website. What Americans are beholding as the new year unfolds is a lot more than just a host of extremely daunting circumstances brought about by corrupt, misguided, and power-hungry people in leadership positions. Oh, no. Something way bigger is afoot. Consider that the well-intentioned but naive liberal leaders of yesteryear are almost nowhere to be found, because they aren't. They're gone. In their place are politicians, wealthy politicians, academics, media personalities, movie stars, directors, producers, whose breathtaking level of dishonesty and delusion actually blows the human mind. It suggests a surreal, dystopian, darkly spiritual dimension to the current troubled era. In truth, we are confronted with a maniacal revolutionary movement emanating from a full-bore rebellion against God, against the Christ consciousness. The unalienable individual rights do not exist anymore, right? The color blindness of Martin Luther King doesn't exist anymore. We are not judged by the content of our character. We are judged by the color of our skin. Ironically, although atheist Karl Marx famously attacked religion, and particularly Christianity, as the opium of the people, he himself concocted the ultimate religious opiate, Marxism. It's a religion, and you kill for it, and you will die for it. For although the fantasy world promise of socialism was a classless society where all people are equal and cared for, in the real world, you have the socialists like Virtual Joe and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They're so dishonest, and they're desperately addicted to power. You can hear it in their voice, in their shock that Donald Trump was acquitted again. Their consciousness so seared by decades of lying and deception and pedophilia and murder and torture that they retain zero capacity for genuinely caring about the poor and disadvantaged. That is all an act. The religion they preach, socialism, progressivism, whatever you want to call it, it's just something ugly. It's something corrupt. And they're self-deceived. They actually believe it. So with such genuine wickedness openly manifested in the land of the free, the home of the brave, so much that it evokes the Apostle Paul's admonitions about powers and principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places, or if you want me to read you out of the book of Matthew, I can describe to you the modern day quite well. What can good Americans do about the precarious state of their country during this time of, let's just call it tribulation, shall we? How should moral, cheek-turning, right-thinking Americans who work hard, love their country, honor its history, and obey its laws do about this? How do we respond? Remember that our current time isn't uniquely burdened by evil and misfortune. It's been around for a long time. Jesus was only able to do his mission for 3 years, and they killed him. It was the church that killed him. The intervening centuries have all too often presented equally daunting circumstances. But they're no more daunting than they are now. Truth is, the human race is so regularly mired in this crap, one could reasonably conclude that crisis and chaos are the norm for humans, with societal peace and prosperity a very rare but cherished aberration. The Global Syndicate has existed since the earth cooled. It hasn't always been packed with demons in the flesh, but it is now. And it's something that we have to deal with. But how do we deal with it? I think we deal with it with love. I think we deal with it with love for one another. And as I said in the book, The Grand Separation, we separate ourselves from it. It's called the Grand Separation for a reason. Light separates from darkness. And when light becomes very bright, darkness cannot exist in it. And the light, the darkness shall comprehend it not, because it won't be in it. And then once the Grand Separation is complete, or as complete as we can get it, then the gathering. And we all pull together in one place. And darkness has no foothold. Does it mean secession? Maybe. Is that the worst thing that could happen, that America secedes from America? No. In every area of life, Americans will have to bear up with grace and dignity in fighting this good fight. Citizens, the ultimate sovereigns in America's unique constitutional system, who may be tempted to drop out of politics, got to do exactly the opposite. You have to vigorously exercise your sacred rights of voting. You have to vigorously speak. You have to vigorously associate freely. You vigorously must worship righteousness. Doesn't mean go to church all the time. You don't have to. But you need to look out for for goodness and for righteousness and for charity and long-suffering, because charity is the pure love of Christ. And one final all-important point. Unlike virtually all other nations, the essence of America is not a common ethnicity. Far from it. But it is a common spirit. A grateful, liberty-loving, generous, essentially Christian spirit, which needs to burn more brightly now in America than ever before. And that's my thought about that. Let's check in the chat room. Yes, Baba Susie, love one another and help your neighbor. And James says, a time to separate. That's true. Don't go in their mix and don't let them in your mix. But be solid in your voting. You know, that's how it works. And my friend in California says the grand separation is ego versus higher self. Who is in charge? There are actually three things at work here. One is the id. The id is the horse. It's the thing that's got the power. It pulls the plow. It jumps the fence. The ego is the rider on the horse. Tells the horse what to do. The higher self, or shall we call it the consciousness of the horse, of the rider, is what tells the ego, or at least informs the ego, convinces the ego what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. And it's not black and white like that. It's more frequency based. What is the higher frequency? What is the lower frequency? And then you can direct the horse as the ego to do what needs to be done, to do the work that needs to be done. In California right now, 1.5 million people have gathered together and said this governor, Adolph Newsom, must go. It must go. Now, of course, the Secretary of State is saying, wait a minute. This signature isn't right. This person doesn't live here. This address is wrong. Don't give up, Californians. Get 2 million signatures. Get 2 million. They might throw out 6 or 7%, but you're still going to have enough to remove him. you don't come together and remove him, you know what I would say. You get what you voted in and what you wish for. Jameson Walker says, I'm in Nashville. I'm hoping Texas secedes. And in the words of Davy Crockett, y'all can go to hell. I'm going to Texas. There's more happening in Texas than just seceding from the Union. There's a push to divide Texas into 5 states. 5 states means 8 more senators. It means several more congressmen. It also means 4 more governors, and they would probably all be Republicans. Texas, by itself, is the 9th largest economy in the world. And right now the federal government is saying, by the way, 30% of your economy comes from oil, shut it off. Texas is not going to do it. They're not going to shut it off. They're not going to turn it off. They're going to sue, and they're going to win. And if they break into 5 states, it will be a magnificent day. Probably Texas needs to do that anyway because they could still be unified as a nation, but they have such a broad demographic. Austin is absolutely nothing like San Antonio or Houston or Dallas. It could easily break into 5 states. All right, how much time do we have? Oh, we have 2 minutes. I can cover the fact that math is racist. Oh, yes, you didn't know this. The Oregon Department of Education is promoting a course for teachers that links math lessons to racism and a culture of white supremacy. Yes, the department last week sent out an online pamphlet for a course called A Pathway to Equitable Math Instruction, which includes a section on dismantling racism in mathematics instruction. The pamphlet includes materials that are essentially a course for spreading wokeness inside of classrooms. No more pi, no more phi, no more fractions. We can't have that. We can't have a dividing line between numbers. That's just racist. The Ode promoted course brands itself, the ODE it's called. Let's see, as an integrated approach to mathematics that centers Black, Latinx, and multilingual students in grades 6 through 8, addresses barriers to math equity, like, memorizing your times tables, stuff like that, barriers, and aligns instruction to grade level priority standards. The course challenges the reality that some answers are simply wrong while broadly challenging America's founding principles. Yeah, well, that's about enough of that crap. I think it's about time to get rid of the teachers union as a threat to national security. All those in favor say aye. It is done. All right, that is Control-Alt-Deport. Take a quick break with the TFR, folks, and we will continue. What's going on in the chat room? The U.S. should break up and only have a common military. That's an interesting concept, Eric. The National Guards exist because we don't want professional soldiers on our streets. We want volunteer soldiers. We want weekend warriors. Yeah, you might send people from Kansas to Tennessee, and you might send people from Kentucky to Oklahoma to do their little exercises, and they do that, I guess. So if you have to put down an insurrection, you're not arresting your neighbors, you're arresting their neighbors. But it's a system that's been working pretty well for 375 years, and I think it'll continue going. Baba Susie, is there going to be boom or hock the world story? A miracle, I guess. The world isn't that unified, Baba Susie. It's broken into a lot of little tiny economies. And there are people that are trying to unify this. They're called Davos. They're called the Bilderbergs. They get together and say, hey, we own 95% of the money. We should be able to tell the world what to do, and it should obey us. But we don't, do we? They still can't tell us what's going to be the most popular car, or the most popular fashion, or the most popular movie, or the most popular song, or the most popular recipe. No, we're the ones that determine that. We're the ones. They didn't determine who was going to be president in 2016. We did that. We had a media that they were paying no attention to. They didn't pay attention to YouTube or Twitter or the social medias. They didn't know Trump was assembling us. They didn't realize it until the campaign was 3/4 of the way over and the guy was drawing 50,000 people to every single rally he went to. And that energy was throbbing. It was vibrating out into the community. It lasted for weeks, months. It built on itself. And it built a frequency of love and togetherness that transcended everything. And it scared the hell out of the globalists. That's why they had to smash the Trump economy in 2020 with Hurricane COVID, which is what they did. And Brian brings up a very good point about term limits. Listen, term limits, the only way they're going to happen is with the Convention of States. That is where the states come together. And by the way, if you can look it up, go to cosaction.com. I will put that in the chat room. Let's do that right now. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. cosaction.com. If you go there, you'll find out how you can get involved in your state. Find out if your state has passed its resolution or not. Sometimes they pass the House, but not the Senate. And call and go down there. You're not working anyway. Go down there and ask them to pass the resolution. We have 15 states. We need 34. Once we get to 34 states, the Constitution says we can have the convention. We have the convention. We make amendments to the Constitution. Those amendments go back out to 38 states, 3/4 of the country. 38 states have to ratify those amendments. Number one amendment, James, is term limits for the Congress and the Senate. Number one. There are some others on the balanced budget amendment. Let's go ahead and bring TFR back in. We're now heading into hour number 3. All right. So we're into the third hour now. And before it gets away from us, I said I was going to reveal this to you, and I'm going to. It was something that was put out. The author of it has asked me to share this story as far and wide as I can. It's very risky. Something that we've been asking the question for quite some time on social media and in my other media, this America Free Radio. Because when we went to Washington, D.C. with 500,000 of my friends, it was the ultimate Trump rally. 500,000 people singing and meeting one another and shaking hands, and there wasn't a mask to be found anywhere, and nobody got COVID. We loved the country, but we were melancholy about the end of the republic because of what the foreign countries had done to our election system. And when the rally part of it was kind of over, my feet were killing me. It was cold. It was windy. And I didn't want to walk another mile to Congress. So I decided to walk the half a mile back to the hotel. I just wanted to beat the rush. And so my group and we turned left instead of right at Pennsylvania Avenue, and we headed back to the hotel. When we got to the hotel, we learned that Antifa and BLM had been granted access to the building. And while they had access to the building, there was a woman who was murdered. She was assassinated at close range, point blank, one shot, killed. Her name was Ashley Babbitt. Well, I went back downstairs. It was about 30 degrees outside. Wind was blowing. An inside edition was doing interviews on the sidewalk. And so I went outside and they granted me an interview, and I stood there in front of the camera with tears coming out of my eyes because I could not believe what I was hearing. And I refuted what he tried to frame in the questions. The interviewer was asking me about storming of Congress and the riot, and I said, there was no storming. What are you talking about? There was no storming. They were invited. They were allowed in. Antifa and BLM was here, yes, but they were in very small numbers. There was only a couple hundred of them, and there were 500,000 of us. We didn't think anything about them. But they went to Congress. They were allowed into the building, and they caused some disruption. But that's not the gist of it. The gist of it, an innocent young woman, unarmed, was shot to death in that building. Well, he didn't want to hear that. He did not want to hear that. What he wanted to hear about was, the armed insurrection. I said, there was no armed insurrection. Nobody had weapons. There was no shooting. There was nothing. BLM broke some windows, but they eventually opened the doors, and people went in. They just went in. It was the people's house. And yeah, it disrupted things, and they made something out of it. And it was all confusing that day, trust me. But after that interview was over, went upstairs, got warm, came back down. It was getting late afternoon. There was a group of us standing out on the sidewalk, which happened to be the smoking room at the time. I don't smoke, but I meet interesting people in the smoking room. One of the individuals was the guy that took the video in the hallway, the one you saw on the news. And I watched the video. It was unbelievable what this guy saw close range. Unbelievable. I've been asked to tell you this story, and I'm going to. On January 6th, unarmed, 14-year high-ranking Air Force veteran and patriotic Trump supporter Ashley Babbitt was savagely gunned down by the U.S. Capitol Police while peacefully protesting the illegitimate executive seizure of power by the Democrats through Manchurian candidate Virtual Joe. That's the opening statement. The thin blue line that we have been asked to support shot her in cold blood at point-blank range without any warning in the halls of the Capitol building. And make no mistake, this was a political assassination, absolutely positively. Establishment Republicans like Matt Schlapp with CPAC gleefully mocked her death after complicit commentators like Eric Erickson endorsed and ordered the public execution of Trump supporters. Don't believe me? I have the tweet right here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to drag this over here into this screen because I want you to see what I see. Now hold on one second. I'm going to switch screens here. All right, here we go. This is my screen. I want you to see this tweet right here. All right? So this, if you look at this, Eric Erickson tweeted, "Shoot the protesters. Waive the rules, impeach. Waive the rules, convict. Waive the rules, deny the ability to run for election again." This is Eric Erickson. See, there's blue check right there. All right? The Capitol Police absolutely refused to release the name of the officer. We asked for a long time. The media, other media, they didn't ask for the name, but we did, and we couldn't get it. The foreign newspaper, The Sun, even spit on Ashley's grave by releasing a clickbait headline, "Who shot Ashley Babbitt, the woman who died at the Capitol?" But they refused to name the officer involved in the heinous killing in the entire article. In the face of arson, looting, terror, and death by Black Lives Matter over the summer, the D.C. Council unanimously passed a police unit reform law specifically requiring the city to swiftly make public the names of officers who use force on citizens. But did this happen? No, it did not. Needless to say, the law is being illegally flaunted now when Republicans are victims of indiscriminate and barbaric police killing and violence. So what I'm about to show you here is who it is. Okay? The fake stream news media, police, and citizens want to label all of us, all the Trump supporters, insurrectionists in the face of a senseless, cold-blooded assassination at point blank by law enforcement on unarmed and innocent protesters in the home of the U.S. Congress. So Trump supporters identified the assassin themselves. We found out who it is. This murderer has now conclusively been identified as Special Agent David Bailey. Yes. And who is he? He is a U.S. Capitol Police officer with short black hair who always wears an unmistakable white and black wristband. Here's a picture of it. Here's a picture of it. Here's a picture of it. Bailey has been in the spotlight before, seen sporting the exact same wristband on many occasions, including the media was celebrating him for his incompetence in allowing a deranged leftist gunman, you remember who we're talking about, right? The Bernie Sanders follower that had the AR-15, that had a list of Republican congressmen who were on the Freedom Caucus in his pocket, and it is reported that the list wasn't even in his handwriting. He approached them, firing his gun, and drove them into the dugout at that baseball diamond, shooting GOP House Whip Steve Scalise in the hip. He nearly died on the spot. It was Bailey who let the guy in. Bailey was awarded both the Medal of Valor and the Badge of Bravery for this great achievement. There he is, right there, next to President Trump. There's the Medal of Bravery. There's it being put around his neck. See that? By the way, he's got the bracelet on right here. Now, here's the bracelet again. You see this? That's a gun. That's the 9mm right there. That's the gun. There's the blast that shot Ashley Babbitt dead before she hit the floor. He allowed the shooting of Scalise. He is the BLM zealot who committed the premeditated, gold-plated execution of an innocent female named Ashley Babbitt. This man should be locked up for a very long time. But at the very least, now that his name has been publicly released, which up to this point has been illegally withheld, he must be indefinitely suspended from the force immediately before any more Trump supporters are violently shot and killed with their blood on his hands. And there's more. Because once we knew who he was, we went after his social media sites. Faith is being tested. I will not fail. David Bailey, Proverbs 18:21. The tongue has the power of life and death. Stakes are high. Words can either speak life or your words can speak death. Our tongues can build others up or they can tear them down. An unchecked fire doubles in size every minute. This is January 6th, that night. Bailey's Facebook bio details him that he is from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He is a U.S. Capitol Police officer. We're importing immigrants that kill Trump supporters. In Bailey's 3 most recent posts, Facebook, all posted following the events of January 6th, he openly admits to carrying out Ashley Babbitt's murder. On January 6th, minutes after the gruesome event, he wrote this: "Thank you to everyone who called and texted. All is good for now." Good referring to the public execution of a 14-year high-ranking Air Force veteran and Trump supporter. 20 minutes later, he posts a Bible passage I just read it to you. He argues that the innocent lady deserved to get shot to death because of her support for President Trump. This man is not just a psychopath. He is evil. Where is the FBI when you need them? If you're listening right now, and I know you often listen to this program, this man needs to be arrested before dawn. We have given you his identification. We've given you his tweets and his posts. His next and most recent post was his most popular yet, with over 100 comments from his friends and many more hundreds of likes. He arrogantly writes, "Faith is being tested. I will not fail." That was 3 days after the murder. It's now been indisputably proven through extensive video analysis, article research, and through his own words that David Bailey is the Capitol Police officer who opened fire on the unarmed group of Trump supporters in the halls. Further confirming our previous report, he has many various photos taken of him inside the White House for his Medal of Bravery ceremony, even posing with the president following the Scalise shooting. There's a close-up of him. There's another. And there's another. And there's another. We archived all of the preceding images for when he inevitably deactivates his Facebook account. Here's all the links. Photo 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got them all in here. I'll keep the links. Bailey even went so far as changing his profile picture to pledge allegiance to the violent and deadly domestic terror organization Black Lives Matter at the height of the summer riots. There he is. That's his profile picture. That's the Capitol policeman. Bailey has repeatedly demonstrated his hatred of Trump supporters over the past few months, leading up to the unhinged slaughter. Following the election, he revealed himself as a partisan Democrat by mocking the voter fraud in favor of Joe Biden. He even tried to harvest votes for the Georgia Senate runoff race, despite residing in Washington, D.C. Here's his tweet right here. Here's his post on Facebook. State of Georgia, will y'all be able to do absentee mail-in postmarked ballots for the runoff in January? Ask FB, ask Georgia. Not trying to stir the pot, but what's a legal vote? Don't the states have their own bylaws and standing operating procedures on counting and when to count? But it gets a lot worse. In September, during a debate, President Trump explicitly told his supporters not to engage in violence. Bailey threatened on Facebook, I quote, "Anybody that is standing back and standing by might want to unfollow me. You don't want these problems." This can only be seen as foreshadowing of his recent deadly attack on Trump supporters. There's the original post right there, September 29th. The direct threat generated hundreds of positive reactions from his friends. If there was any ambiguity in this lunatic, violent threat, he made it clear in the comments, responding to a friend, Stephen Andre Williams' question. "Oh, you got smoke?" Bailey said, "Bruh, you know I stay with the smoke." That's the gun. For those of you who are not criminals, the smoke is a language referring to physical conflict, often involving weapons. Wet works, it's often called. He even elaborated once again in the same comment section that he was threatening gun violence, responding to friend Van Essa's image reading, "Don't let stand back and stand by get your ass whooped. We are not our ancestors." Bailey said, "Boom. This is a truly deranged man. You should not be allowed anywhere near a firearm, let alone be paid to carry one around and shoot at people." President Trump honored Agent Bailey at the highest level, elevating him to a national level, and sung his praises of heroism and bravery. And Bailey savagely betrayed him and all of us, murdering a helpless Trump supporter in cold blood. The media has refused to cover this story, but we are covering it. We can't hide their crimes any longer. This man needs to be in jail. Washington, D.C. must bring Agent Bailey to justice for Ashley Babbitt's sake. And that is what I'm talking about. So, this is the guy. We are doing our best here to make sure that justice is done. Always the rule of law, not the rule by law. Okay? So let me check my time. Oh, yes, we have 8 minutes left. Any comments? Yeah, FBI have nice windbreakers. Other than that, useless. Well, if you've read my books, and I'm sure you have, those of you in the chat room, one of the things that I revealed to you is that the FBI was founded in 1935 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And they were given a charter, and that charter is to protect the interests of the Democrat Party, which they have done. And they've been doing that all the way up till now. That's why the FBI records were found in Hillary Clinton's personal residence and nothing was done. Only her fingerprints were on the records. That's why Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin's laptop never gets shared with anyone. That's why Hunter Biden's laptop never gets shared with anyone. That's why the murderers of Seth Rich, not the ones that actually did the shooting, but the ones who hired the shooters, never gets investigated. That's why no justice was ever given to Chris Stevens or others who died around the Clintons. That's why. Because the FBI was founded in corruption. They have always existed in corruption, and they serve corruption to this very second. The FBI, in my opinion, should be totally disbanded. It doesn't mean all the agents are bad, but the good agents can be absorbed by other agencies, NSA, other police organizations, but the FBI needs to go away. All of these Democrat-founded organizations need to disappear because they're designed to rip the country apart from the guts. As I said, 34 or 35 individuals going to prison right now would save the world. Because the rest of the world sees what I see. And I try to bring it to your attention, not to be divisive, but to be informative, so that you will also call for that to occur. Because we don't want to follow this path that's laid out before us. We're trying everything not to walk on that path. History is a cruel and relentless teacher, is it not? I mean, before the American War of Northern Aggression, the Southern states tried everything in their power to block the effectiveness of these federal laws against them. The victors of the war interpreted the Constitution to mean that the federal law is supreme. And it's happening again. But there's a better way. Lawmakers in Missouri have taken a bold step, and it is provocative, to preserve gun rights by drafting legislation that would ban police agencies from using unconstitutional federal laws to confiscate guns from citizens. Oh, yeah. Representatives Jared Taylor, who's a Republican, said that a bill which is still in committee would protect his state's citizens from extreme measures such as a gun confiscation law that Virtual Joe is contemplating and has been talking about. We are here to defend those rights against an out-of-control federal government. And that's exactly what this bill does. Second Amendment Preservation Act was advanced through the state's majority Republican House on Wednesday of this week, and that bill would harshly penalize law enforcement agencies and officers who would be found guilty of confiscating a firearm or firearms while using federal and not state law as a pretext. Simply put, it reads like this. No matter what gun laws are passed by Virtual Joe and his Democrat cohorts, or mandated by executive order, they will not apply to Missourians who want to exercise their constitutional rights. That is called nullification. Plain and simple, that is called nullification. It was the base reason why the secession occurred in the first place. What happened was the states said, well, that's all well and good. We appreciate the 7 states up there in the north that have used their majority in Congress because of their majority population in their metropolitan cities to vote in a law that says you're going to tax our goods as they go to Europe and our services and goods as they come back from Europe, going both ways, and do all this to support your metropolitan cities in the north, and we get no benefits from that. So we're going to ignore that. That law is unconstitutional, and we're not going to abide by it. So the boats ran anyway. And so the North put their ships in the ocean and in the bay near Sumter and tried to stop the ships from leaving. It was called a blockade. Well, they ran the blockade, and they often got in fights with American ships trying to do American business. So finally they had enough of it. And they tried everything. They went to the House of Representatives. They went to the Senate. They made impassioned speeches. They submitted resolutions. Nothing worked. And so they seceded. South Carolina and 12 states seceded. They said, fine, we'll print our own money. We'll have our own laws. We'll change the gauge of our railroad. You stay up north, and we'll stay down south. That's the end of that. We are now the Confederacy. Lincoln was such a poor diplomat, he couldn't put it back together, couldn't resolve it. He couldn't fight Congress. They way outnumbered him. He couldn't get it done. So they ended up going to war. And it wasn't until Sherman marched through town after town, raping and pillaging and burning and salting and destroying one community after another, striking fear from Virginia all the way down to Houston, that the states finally surrendered. And they were forced back into the Union, all except the state of Texas. They didn't sign the Reconstruction Act. The point is, it was nullification that got us there. And it was the Supremacy Clause that was in the Constitution that was used by Lincoln to say a nation divided against itself cannot stand. And going after the Second Amendment is designed to weaken the population. So we'll let TFR take a quick break here in about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So I'll take a break and we'll be into our final segment. This resolution, this law that's going to pass in Missouri, declares that laws, rules, orders, or other actions which restrict or prohibit manufacture, ownership, and use of firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition exclusively within the state exceed the powers granted to the federal government except to the extent they are necessary and proper for governing and regulating land and naval forces of the United States, or for the organizing, arming, and disciplining militia forces actively employed in the service of the United States Armed Forces. Furthermore, the Second Amendment Preservation Act states that the Missouri court system and the state police agencies would have a duty to protect gun rights for law-abiding citizens. In other words, if you come into our state as a federal agent and you try to confiscate weapons, you will be arrested. My question is, do you think more states should follow Missouri's lead? Another portion of the bill goes even further. It goes so far as to strip qualified immunity from officials who could potentially find themselves down the road using federal firearm laws as a justification for gun confiscation. Qualified immunity, now I know you've heard this before when it comes to cops killing people, of course, protects government agencies and employees in many cases from facing civil liability. That's why people at the DMV do exactly what the hell they want to do, and it doesn't matter how rude they get to you, they have qualified immunity. In conclusion, this short bill in its current form adds that any person, while acting as an official, who enforces or attempts to enforce any of the infringements identified in this bill will be permanently ineligible to serve as a law enforcement officer or to supervise law enforcement officers in the state or in any political subdivision of this state. That's nullification, and it is powerful. It is something that is a path to the Civil War. And I really don't want to see us go that way. And I have to say that a law like this does not have much teeth to it because of the Supremacy Clause and the precedents that have been established by the Supreme Court. It is very difficult for states to exercise their rights against federal overreach. It is happening, but it is more saber rattling. It's more yelling. It's more kicking and stomping your feet as a state, because eventually what will happen is the state or the federal government will push the issue, and they will bring federal agents in to confiscate guns. And when they do, the sheriffs and even the state police may stand at the border and say, "You shall not pass," and that will be a terrible confrontation for America. That's not something that we want to see. That is definitely a path to civil war. When the organized protection services of a state get involved protecting the state against the federal government, that's civil war. If it's one state or 10 states or 50 states, that's civil war. And we really don't want to see us go that way. Final segment, we'll play the TFR intro. All media is engaged now, so we have Truth Frequency Radio Network, where the Truth Freaks hang out, and we are not afraid to let our Truth Freak flag fly. We are streaming to you live from the America Free Radio Studios, somewhere east of the Appalachian Mountains, as X Squared Radio, and we're streaming on YouTube, Twitch, DLive, Facebook, Twitter, and it is glorious. All of the people that are listening on all those media. And there will be more in the morning, and there'll be more on Tuesday and Wednesday, and by the end of this week, thousands of people will hear this broadcast. If you're here tonight, I'm just simply asking you, please subscribe on any one of the media that you're logged into right now following us. It's all free, all the time. I would also ask that you hit a like button on any of those media. Please, hitting that like button tells that media that we're important. That you're important. Your opinion is important. And please join the chat, because there are dozens and dozens of you in there right now. And I value your input. Tessa1111 says they'll throw it out as unconstitutional. True, they will. And it will set a terrible precedent, by the way, because it'll allow the federal government to... It goes a little bit beyond this, because we're not talking about law here. We're not talking about laws that are written and debated by Congress, sent to the Senate, goes to committee, gets amendments, comes back out as a bill, goes to the president for signature, and he signs it. We're not talking about law here. What we're talking about are executive orders or executive memoranda. Both have the force of law, but executive orders are designed only to influence federal agencies and federal properties. They're not designed to affect states. An executive order, and this needs to be tested in court, it is a subject of the Convention of States, that the ability for the federal government to insert itself into state commerce, it has to be limited. It is described in the Constitution, but it is with ambiguous language. And the reason it is because as good as the Founding Fathers were in the original founding convention, they tried to see forward. They tried to say, well, what happens if, and what happens if? They came from the most powerful government in the world. The British government ruled the world. Their wooden ships and their armies and their trained soldiers and their money, they took human flesh and assets from anybody they wanted. The sun never set on the British Empire. For centuries, they controlled the world. And then America broke away. Well, they tried to take it back. They tried to insert themselves. But Americans were obstinate. Since 1620 to 1775, that's a long time in those days, because the sun moved a lot slower over the sky. There was no such thing as clocks or watches or atomic power or electricity. Nothing. It was seasons that governed your lives. It was a long time. Americans were able to establish a unique link to the land, a unique capitalism that said, this is my land and I'm going to grow corn on it or goats or mine gold or whatever, and I'm going to make my own empire. Everybody did that. And it was good for society. It changed the world. It saved the world from the British Empire. And try as the British Empire would, they could not defeat it. And so the Global Syndicate is what I call them. They infiltrated our government. From 1787 to the almost mid 1800s, it was a struggle. They tried the Revolutionary War. They tried the War of 1812. They tried suing. They tried economic pressures and blockades. Nothing worked. And then in 1848, they formed their own party. The Anti-Federalists formed a party called the Democrat Party. The DNC was formed in 1848. Within 5 years, they had smashed the Union. They had gone from 13 colonies to 20. And the northern colonies were well established, had a booming economy, had access to the ocean like no other place in the world. And they had the resources to boot and the population, which allowed them to control Congress. And they just smashed the South. And so they tried to defeat the country through civil war. And even that didn't work. And when that was over, a few years later, they began to assert a central bank. Wouldn't fly. Wouldn't happen. Andrew Jackson blocked it. Hamilton wanted it. But several presidents tried to block it. And then in 1910, in the dead of night, on Jekyll Island, they fashioned the Federal Reserve Act. And they brought it back, and by 1913, it was law. They had created the Federal Reserve. The banks that were against it, the bankers that controlled the banks that were against it, they were loaded on the Titanic and they were sunk to the bottom of the sea. I'm telling you, it's a story you would not believe if you didn't read it. Once they controlled the money supply, they began to infiltrate inside the government. Oh, it made waves, let me tell you, because the people responded to a stock market that had access to a fiat currency. It boomed. The middle class was coming on. And then in 1928, they decided to contract the money supply, and they smashed the markets. It didn't hurt them because they'd pulled all their money out into assets. They owned property and gold, and it didn't hurt them, but it smashed the middle class. The middle class evaporated. It evaporated and dried up with the farmlands of the Dust Bowl. It was gone. In 1933, when Roosevelt took power, after they smashed the Hoover economy, which is, by the way, a lot like the Trump economy, History excoriates him, but he was an engineer just like Trump. He was an outsider just like Trump. He tried to give people access and more control over their own economics just like Trump, and they just killed it. They just killed it. They didn't use a virus that time. That was 1918. By 1933, the flamboyant governor of New York, the radical fascist from New York, swooped in, took over the presidency, and reigned for almost 16 years, untouchable. And he established a fascist government that we have today. The agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations that he formed metastasized from a few dozen to over 650. They write all our laws. They spend all of our money. They control every aspect of our lives, from birth to death, from our total education to our healthcare system, to our transportation system, to our monetary system. They control everything. Everything. You have no rights in that government. There is no voting in that government. There's no representation in that government. These are not elected people. They are the government. The elected officials are clowns. They're jokes. They conduct impeachment. They make speeches. They just raise money and spend money, and they just do nothing anymore. It's all done by the agencies. And so in 2012, I wrote a book, and that book was called Alienated Nation. And that book was designed to establish what was called a Convention of States, an Article 5 convention. When the founders in 1787 were putting the government together, they decided, you know what? We can't possibly think of everything. Someday this central government's going to be big, and it's going to be powerful, and it's going to be just like the government we just left. How do we stop it? How do we rein it in when it's time? And so they put in Article 5, which allows the states, who are ostensibly governed by that federal government, they knew eventually they would be ruled by that federal government. And that wasn't the idea at all, that the states could come together, 2/3 of them, and say, just a minute, we're going to amend the Constitution. We're going to fix some things that have allowed you, federal government, to get out of control. And one of those things is the Commerce Clause. It's vague, it's kind of smoky, it's kind of ambiguous. It isn't a heavy document, not very wordy in the first place. But the Commerce Clause is really loosey-goosey. And it's only through court precedent, that they have been able to do what they do. And so what needs to happen is the convention will come together, just like it says in the book. 6 amendments will be changed or passed, and it will fix it. It will right the ship. And what it will allow the Supreme Court to do is to say, you federal agency, and you bureau, and you department, and you agency, you don't have the authority to do what you say you're doing. You don't have the ability to do that any longer. The states do, but you don't. And so what will happen is that's the revolution we're looking for. That's why we call this program the Voice of the Revolution. And when we first wrote the book, there weren't many of us. Now there are over 2 million of us, 2 million people in COS Action, Convention of States Action.com. 2 million of us. And there are delegates in all 50 states. And we know pretty much the laws, the amendments we want to make. We know we want to put term limits in place. We know we want to put some sort of balanced budget amendment in there to protect the federal government from bankrupting the United States. We know that we want to repeal the 16th Amendment, which is the income tax. That's got to go away. The IRS and all of its power to know how much we earn. And for us to waive our Fifth Amendment rights by signing a 1040, all that would go away. The government would then get its money by a federal tax, a federal sales tax, what we call a value-added tax. All countries have it except ours. And that value-added tax would be a windfall for the federal government. For one thing, all the cost that it takes hundreds of billions of dollars companies and governments spend to figure out how much we earn. All that goes away. And the people that they have no idea what they earn and can't know what they earn, it wouldn't matter. Because now it doesn't matter how much people earn. It only matters how much people spend. So all the illegal aliens, 25 million illegal aliens that pay zero tax right now, zero income tax, they would now pay the tax. Tourists, rich people who spend way more than poor people, they would pay the tax. Right now, they pay nothing. Nothing. It doesn't matter who buys the stuff. A company, an individual, a group of individuals, they pay the tax. Huge amounts of new revenue would come into the government while lowering the overhead of gathering that money. That's profit. And it would very soon pay off the national debt, and then we would begin lowering that value-added tax because we wouldn't be carrying that debt anymore. And that's constitutional. That's the way it was originally supposed to be set up. The 16th Amendment is actually unconstitutional. Not been challenged in court properly, but it wouldn't have to be if we did an Article 5 convention. It would just be nullified. It would just be written out. And then, of course, the Commerce Clause, which is a little more complex because, you have over 650 agencies, departments, bureaus, and administrations. There are millions of regulations that are piled in there that now have the force of law, every one of which we need to obey or else. And it's everything from gathering rainwater to selling raw milk, everything you can think of. All of that goes away. And then there are other things that deal with declarations of war and War Powers Acts and things like that. But it's not going to be a whole lot. Not going to change the Constitution to something that it isn't right now. It can't. It can't. It can't get out of control. George Soros can't come in with all his money and take it over and all of a sudden write his own laws. That wouldn't happen. It would not happen because 38 states would have to ratify it. 38 states would have to debate it out amongst the people in their state houses and in their state senate, and they would have to ratify. And if they don't ratify, it doesn't happen. The amendment doesn't pass. It needs to be carefully written. It needs to be simple. One of the amendments that could pass, I can tell you right now, would be very popular, would be a voting rights amendment. A voting rights amendment that has 6 words. 6 words. Vote once in person with ID. Simple. There's no law more simple than that. Vote once in person with ID. Period. That would solve all of these problems. Of course, the Democrat Party, as we know it, would evaporate, but it wouldn't break my heart if that happened. That's the book, Alienated Nation. It's for sale on Amazon. If you want to know how to get one, you can put my name into Amazon and it will come up, or you can put any of these titles into Amazon and all the books will come up. And it's a great time to read right now. Spring is coming up. You need to have a boost. You need to have something that will give you hope. These books will do it for you. Read one, read all, and here's the bonus I give you. If you buy the paperback, the audio version is free to you. It's free. It's a bonus. I give it to you. The address is right inside the book. All you have to do is write to the address, and I will send you the link, and you can stream it from my server. You don't even have to download it. So simple. I do it all the time when I travel. I listen to my own recordings. I go, wow, that guy's pretty good, even though he's not a professional. It's pretty cool. All right, let's go to the chat room. We got about 9 minutes. Let's see if we can answer some questions here. So many people in here. Let's see. Brian says, get the states to take their land back they gave to Sin City, Washington, D.C. They didn't give it. The federal government took it. Yes, they have 628 million acres which is approximately just under 30% of the land mass of the United States, is owned by the federal government. That is absolutely not constitutional. The Constitution says the federal government can only own the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. All the rest of that land, not legal. They own almost the entire state of Alaska, half the states of Utah and Idaho and Colorado. You believe that? They own the state. The people that live in that state, they don't have access to that land. All the aquifers, all the forests, all the coal mines, all the gold mines, all the oil reserves are owned by the federal government, except for in Texas. I'm just saying, it could be done. The states could easily take their land back. Oregon tried to do it, but then the public outcry was, "Oh my God, you're going to let the private industry destroy this land." That's not true. That land's been managed for way over 150 years by private citizens, and they do a wonderful job doing it. They manage the forests, they keep the streams clean, they don't let the brush build up so fires start, they keep all the dead stuff cleaned out. They manage the population of wildlife. Humans do a way better job of managing. There's more standing timber in the United States right now than ever in the history of this country. I'm not kidding. No. You see, in those days, there was nobody to put the fires out. When lightning or something started a fire, it just burned. It just burned to the shore. It burned everything. 5 states would go up in flames. No one could stop it. Not with a horse and wagon and a bucket of water. Couldn't stop it. We do now. And he says someone should pop the door open on Fort Knox. Jury's still out on that. We didn't mine that gold. It doesn't belong to us. It's the basis behind our money. But I do like the idea, Brian, of going back to a gold-backed currency. Every long-term successful nation, and we're talking about long-term like 1,000 years, based their money on gold. Now, right now we're basing our money on prime numbers, Bitcoin. Not as many prime numbers as there are gold, but gold's pretty rare. I say we go to a gold-backed currency and go away from a fiat currency. What story, Hunt? Huntmaster says, I have read that story, NEE 1952. I guess that means since 1952. Well, you've been reading longer than me, but I don't know what that story is. You have to have a little more behind the pronoun than that for me to understand. Tessa 1111 says there's nothing in Fort Knox. I don't know that either. I talked to George Norrie one day about it, and he said he didn't think there was any gold in Fort Knox. I think there probably is, because we mine gold. We do placer mining and all kinds of stuff in Arizona and Alaska, and I think there's lots of gold. Tessa says a pile of IOUs. Maybe, but, we haven't been paying nations in gold. Not in a long time. I think, trying to remember now if it was the Czech Republic or one of them anyway, they asked for their gold, and they got it. We delivered it to them, but that was the last one. We didn't do it again. We kept the rest of the gold. I don't know what a bond certificate is. I've never seen one myself. I've never seen them traded. Joe Becker says they couldn't contain all the IOUs in there. Just because we owe money not primarily to other countries. We do to Russia and to Saudi Arabia and to Japan and China, but most of the money is actually owed to the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve doesn't have any money. They just created it out of nothing. So we pay them interest on nothing, which they lent to, I don't know, it's a weird system. To own the mortgage and to be the debtor at the same time is pretty strange. President Trump was a genius in the sense that he welded together essential parts of the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve. And he appointed the most recent and majority of the board members of the Federal Reserve. Now, I'm worried that Janet Yellen is in there getting ready to put her Jellonomics in place again. If she puts her Yellonomics in place again, it could rip the whole thing apart because she has access to unprecedented liquidity right now. Unprecedented. It's in the 10 to $15 trillion range. That liquidity is supposed to be used for something else. It's not to be used for the Green New Deal. That's our money. That's supposed to be Americans' money. We made that money, and it should be ours. And they're going to take it for themselves, and that's got me greatly worried. Had Donald Trump been president for 4 more years, I think he would have fixed the issues with the Federal Reserve. He would have emasculated it. That means he would have cut its balls off. Tess is correct. We sent all our assets and manufacturing to a foreign country, all gone. All previous assets are gone, yes. But we're building new ones. We're building new ones. We're not building new ones and shipping it to them. They're building assets and shipping it to us. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the Chinese have become the premier tool builders of the world. I'm not kidding. But they're not making stuff in China for us. They're sending us the tools, and we're making the stuff in the U.S. It's a lot. It's big. We're talking big injection mold, big metal fab tools. They're all being made in China because it's the cheapest, fastest tool makers in the world. Some is pretty good quality, some is excellent quality, and some is just pure crap. But the point is, they're making the tools, and we're making the stuff. So the tools are being made in China and shipped to us, not the other way around. Used to be, I helped in the liquidation myself in the mid-2000s to the end of the 2000s, 2010, 2011. I was one of the ones who was taking plants apart and putting stuff on trains and boats and shipping it to China. That was where the money was, and that's what we did. But it's not that way now. It's all coming back, and it's all because of President Trump. So what I want you to do is go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. We try as much as we can to keep you informed, give you hope, give you the truth, so you can make an informed decision on your own. What I would really, really like you to do is to tell your friends about us and help us grow our audience. Because the more people that hear this story, instead of the story of hate and fear and prejudice that's being spewed by the fake stream news, the quicker we're going to be able to save this planet. The quicker we're going to be able to return to peace and prosperity, to joy, peace, and happiness, and that's what we're all about. So please start it by going and looking for the good in others and helping it to grow a little bit every day. Everyone. The key, my friends, to a happy relationship is the soft answer. The soft answer. Okay? So we'll see you on Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. This is America Free Radio. I'm Brooks Agnew saying, peace, Earth Explorers. Now go and do. All right?